Oh, today's a good day, Weather's good and whatnot, but to be honest, I don't feel that today was the greatest. And I'm gonna touch on this idea that I talked about in a previous video, and it was rather well received. It was about making every single day decent. And the reason why I say you make every single day decent is because saying that every single day could be the best day of your life is just pure delusion. Say, for example, you're this dude that just got hit with stage 4 cancer, lost his job, his whole family dies, the rest of his family hates him, and he's homeless. Would you say, come on, cheer up, little dude? You could still see this as the best day of your life. See the glass as half full, No. If you did that to someone who suffered like that, I'm gonna slap you in the face. Because seeing every single day as the best day is just straight up delusion. And the only reason why you can't see every single day as the best is because you end up ignoring all the bad, all the problems that you face. And that's why I say you make every single day decent. Because decent is just some bad mixed in with the good. But you emphasize the good over the bad. I'm not saying you shouldn't work towards, living the best day every single day and making the most out of it. No, absolutely. I think you should try and live every single day to your fullest, not wasting and, truly spending your days where you want them to be. But you have to accept that not every single day is gonna go your way. Not every single day is gonna, work out for you. I'm gonna bring up my childhood as an example of such, because I feel I've always had this attitude of like, all right, it is what it is. We didn't have the best day, but we have other things to look forward to. There's other goods in my life right now. As a kid, I definitely suffered quite a bit. In my childhood, I don't remember very much as from years 5 to my birth, but past that, when I was in Canada, I remember quite a bit. I remember my mom and sister, they weren't ideal, let's just say. They definitely could be a little bit better to me as a kid, but I definitely don't blame them nor hate them for what they did. Because, well, I wouldn't take any of it back. I wouldn't be who I am today without them, without the things that I did to me. But as a kid, I remember moments where it felt like my mom and sister both gave up on me, where they really didn't care much about me. I remember one night when, I don't know what happened, but I think I was just in my own mind thinking of old memories of how I was beat as a kid. And I ended up going to bed just crying. I think my mom picked up on that. I didn't feel like I was crying very loud, but my mom could tell that I was crying. And she sat there at the doorway watching me. My sister comes around and asks, like, what's happening? And she says that, or my mom says to her that she thinks I'm crying. And then my sister ends up saying to my mom, oh, he's probably just thinking about stuff like that. And they both just end up just kind of ignoring me. And I think I cried myself to sleep that night. As an 8-year-old kid, that definitely hits very different. That definitely hits weirdly, I really don't know how to describe it. But as a kid, I definitely was not in the best place either. And I'm not blaming them either because they have their own trauma to go through, My father wasn't the best husband. And I'm just gonna leave it as that because it was quite a personal thing. But my mom and dad are separated, and the main reason was because my father wasn't the greatest husband and he had a lot to regret and repent for. My sister was also very much mistreated by our grandparents as a kid. So our whole family does have quite a bit of trauma and suffering going through us. But I don't know if I can say the same for them, but because of that, I realized that every single day isn't that bad. Like the worst days that I've had where, I hurt myself, terrible grade, rejected by universities, whatever it is, so be it. I don't really care. because I knew that it could always be worse. Even in those moments where, I suffered as a kid, I realized that it couldn't have been as bad as dying. As a 5-year-old, I had a near-death experience on the way back from kindergarten. So long story short, I was on the bus with my grandpa heading back home from kindergarten. And what ended up happening was I sat in a seat, and a high schooler basically asked me, can I sit there, or can you give the seat for me and my friend? I said no. He asked to play a game of rock, paper, scissors. If I lost, I had to give him my seat. If I won, I could keep the seat. So I said sure, why not? I ended up losing the game of rock, paper, scissors, but being a little brat, I didn't want to give the seat. So I started pushing him as he tried to push me off, and he used a little too much strength where he ended up pushing me into one of the handlebars for a bus, where I hit my head, my skull. There's still a dent there of what I think happened, and I almost died that day. But thank God I'm still alive to this day, and I'm here. But it's moments like that that make me realize that it can always get worse. It can always be worse. And a prime example of that is the story of Job. For those of you who don't know the story of Job, it's basically this dude who, in the beginning, he was introduced as a very successful man, He had a lot of livestock, he had a lot of land, a bunch of kids, a loving wife, a very beautiful wife, and he was just a very well-off person. He was happy, he was living well. But God one day was talking to Satan, asking him to take a look at his faithful servant, Job. And Satan, doing classic Satan things, asked, let me test Job, let me test him. And God says, sure, but just don't kill him, right? Or in the beginning he says, preserve his health at the very least. So first, he takes away his kids and his livestock. And in that way, his wife begins to hate him for having all this happen, and basically says that let go of your integrity and kill yourself. That's basically what his wife says. But Job, still continuing to live, still having a will to live, continues, and he kind of just suffers. He suffers for a little while, and then later Satan comes back and says, let me test Job again. And God says, sure, just preserve his life, right? So then he ends up getting a bunch of disease. He has a bunch of blemishes on his skin, and he's just constantly in pain. And so Job goes on each and every chapter saying, why, God, do you make me suffer? Why, God, do you make me hurt so much? Why, God, do you put me through all this? And it's one story of cruelty, where you almost feel like God doesn't have any sympathy for Job. God doesn't really care for Job. But I honestly believe that this act from God is honestly an act of love. An act of love of a father putting their child through hardship, knowing that they would come out stronger, Would you ever blame a father for, letting their kid cry because they're being a brat? No. Would you ever blame a father for putting their child through difficult things and having them learn new skills? No. That was the very much same thing that Job went through. God let him suffer and have these hardships so that he would learn to rely on God more. And in the end, God had to outright come down, tell him this thing so that he would learn, because he really saw that Job was suffering a little too much. He saw that Job really hardened his heart and was unwilling to learn. And the story of Job is one that always makes me realize that it could always be worse. At least I ain't Job, right? But sometimes I feel that as a kid, there were moments where I felt like Job, where everybody hated me, where I felt no one really liked me, right? I felt like I had no favor, no one there to speak to, no one there to really lean on and rely on. Even my own family that I thought would have me didn't really reciprocate that at times. And the reason why I want to bring this up is to make you understand why it's so important to accept the bad with the good. To work forward from these bad things and accept them as a part of your character, to deal with each and every day a little better. The more you suffer, the more you can see awful days as just okay or decent. the worst days you've had, it makes other bad days less bad in comparison. When you compare them to the worst kind of things that could happen, some of the things that you complain about really aren't that big or grave, you know? A lot of the modern day issues I like to think as very minor and very just redundant almost. The things I complain about each and every day are really just first world country problems. Where, you know, oh, it's so hot out here when it's like 25 degrees. When people in Africa are starving and dying, well, I can live such comfortable lives, going to the gym every single day and doing these things, and still end up making excuses for my laziness and inadequacy. This is why I say you can always make every single day decent, but not good. You know, not the best. Try to look towards each day with an attitude of preparing yourself for the worst, but still hoping for the best. It's very paradoxical and hard to maintain, but they're not mutually exclusive. When you realize that things can go bad, when you hope for the good, it kind of bounces out. It's kind of like a yin and yang kind of thing, where even if things don't go good, you realize that you're already prepared for the bad, so you end up like not really caring about it too much. But when things do go good, you end up being a lot more grateful knowing that you are actually prepared for the worst, prepared that this day might be your last. I'm not saying that you should live each day thinking that, you know, you're gonna die tomorrow, but you should live it as if it were that way, not knowing and thinking that it actually were this way. I hope this idea was at least very much interesting to you guys and hearing it. But yeah, I think that's about it for me here today. Hope you all have a decent day, you know, maybe better, maybe worse, so be it. But hope you all have a decent day, and that'll be about it for me.